Now, my angle tonight comes from the cold and wet nights of Kisumu County following the brutal evictions in Kibos area that have hit national headlines over the last 1 week or so. Now, I talk about the cold and wet nights because the evictions somehow coincided, either deliberately or not, with the current episode of heavy rains and chilly nights. Between 3,500 and 5,000 people have been left in the cold after their homestays were demolished in what has been explained as a move to recover land belonging to the Kenya Railways. Now, tonight I could go into the horror of what happened on that night 5 days ago, including the one child who died and the historically significant buildings that have been brought down, including some places of worship. But those, sad as they are only part of a long horror story that has been going on in this country almost all the time, at different times, in different places, for many decades. The story of forceful evictions of people from places they call home. The pattern is almost always the same. It's almost always happening at night when the victims are deep in sleep. It always seems to be carried out by shadowy figures who never identify themselves. It always comes with a dispute on whether there was notice given or not. It almost always happens to poor people with limited alternative livelihoods. Yet it always leads to displacement and destruction of property, and sometimes even death. In other words, it is always violent and brutal. Now, there's no better way of saying this, but honestly, it is downright primitive for us to be talking about such inhumane and violent evictions in this day and age. Of course, I understand that land ownership in this country is a complex issue, that there are many instances where people need to be removed from land, either to give way for some public good such as road or railways, or because the land didn't belong to them in the first place. But surely we can't say that as a country we are incapable of removing people from a piece of land without using such brute force effected by faceless people in the middle of the night. Surely we can't say that as a country we cannot find ways of preserving the dignity of fellow citizens, even if we are to remove them from land that they currently occupy. Why do we displace people so viciously only for some leaders to turn up the following day offering alternative land to settle the displaced? Why not give them the alternative land before the evictions? In the case of Kibos, for instance, the Kenya Railways has said that the evictions were carried out after the expiry of a 90-day period. Well, that may well be, but when on earth did Kenya Railways realize that this was their piece of land? Why allow people to live on land for generations upon generations and suddenly show up as if from a different planet in outer space? Now, according to the Land Act, apart from notice, any eviction must be preceded by a proper identification of those taking part in the eviction or demolition. Where groups of people are involved, government officials should be present during the eviction. That's a law. The exercise must be carried out in a manner that respects the dignity, the right to life, and security of those affected. It must also include measures to protect the vulnerable, women, children, the elderly, persons living with disability. And it must also give the affected people the first priority to demolish and salvage their property. That's what the law says. Now, I'm citing these provisions just because there's a long-running argument out there that there is no comprehensive legislation on evictions in Kenya. But ladies and gentlemen, this is really not a legal issue. This speaks about us, about what we truly value. This speaks about our commitment to upholding and protecting the vulnerable amongst us. This speaks about shame. In a few days, the Kisumu demolitions will most certainly fade away, as have many others before them. But this is a badge of shame on our government, on our county leaders, on our elected representatives who run to these same people every 5 years to look for votes. It is a badge of shame on all of us who elect all these people and allow them to treat fellow Kenyans with so much indignity. That is my angle tonight.